Ethan Carter stood inside the quiet research station on Calyx 9, watching the slow drift of dust beyond the reinforced observation window. Space outside looked calm, almost empty, but he had learned over time that empty was never truly empty. There was always motion, radiation, unseen particles, and signals moving through the dark like whispers that no human ear could hear. Behind him, the station was alive with soft mechanical hums. Air recyclers pulsed steadily. Food synthesis units clicked and hissed as they tried new chemical combinations. It was a small outpost, built for long-term survival testing, not for exploration or war. Just science. Just survival. That was what Earth had sent them here for. Anna Brooks was in the lab section, carefully watching a glass-like container inside a sealed chamber. Inside it, a dark liquid swirled slowly. It was thicker than water, almost like melted shadows under soft light. She had been working on it for 3 weeks without much sleep. Ethan had told her to slow down, but she always pushed forward when something caught her interest. "This batch is different," Anna said without looking away from the chamber. Ethan stepped closer. "Different how?" Anna adjusted a control on the panel. "The aroma output is stronger. Much stronger." The base compound reacted more deeply with the synthetic carbon blend. Ethan frowned slightly. "That's good or bad?" Anna finally looked at him, and there was a small spark of excitement in her eyes. "We are not sure yet. But it might be the closest match to Earth-style stimulant drinks we have made in space." Ethan gave a small smile. "So basically, space coffee." Anna nodded. "Yes. But stronger. Much stronger." The station had been experimenting with food and drink synthesis for months. The goal was simple: humans needed comfort in space. Real comfort. Not just nutrition packs or flavor tablets. Something warm. Something familiar. Something that reminded them of Earth mornings, even when Earth felt very far away. Anna called it dark brew because of its deep color. Ethan called it liquid confidence as a joke, because every time Anna tested a new version, she became more energetic than usual. The chamber released a soft warning sound. A thin mist formed inside the sealed container as the brew stabilized. Tiny particles escaped through controlled vents designed to measure aroma strength. These vents were supposed to be safe. They were supposed to release only trace amounts for analysis. But space does not always respect "supposed to." Outside the station, in the silence of Calyx 9's orbit, invisible scent particles drifted away. They moved slowly at first, then spread wider as solar winds carried them. No one noticed. Not Ethan. Not Anna. Not even the station systems. It was just a small experiment. One of hundreds conducted every month. Ethan turned back toward the console. "We should log this batch and send the data to Earth." Anna nodded but hesitated. "We should also test it under full release conditions." "Just a small controlled vent cycle." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That's what we just did." Anna shook her head. "No. That was partial release. I mean full atmospheric simulation. Like it would behave in open space." Ethan sighed. "Anna, this is still experimental." She crossed her arms. "Everything here is experimental." He could not argue with that. Calyx 9 was built for experiments that Earth was too careful to try. That was the point. Risk controlled by distance. Mistakes that could not harm anyone back home. After a moment, Ethan gave a slow nod. "Fine. But only a short cycle." Anna's face brightened slightly. 30 seconds. 10, Ethan corrected. She pretended to be disappointed but agreed. The system activated again. Inside the chamber, the dark brew reacted gently under controlled pressure. Aroma particles increased, forming a faint invisible cloud that passed through the vent system. At first, nothing seemed different. The station continued its quiet rhythm. Machines hummed. Lights blinked. Data screens updated. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching the readings. Everything looked stable. Anna studied the output curve. Aroma dispersion is higher than expected. That's fine, Ethan said. It's just scent molecules. Space is big. Nothing will care. Anna did not respond immediately. She stared at the graph a little longer. Then she said, "It is spreading farther than predicted." Ethan glanced at her screen. "By how much?" "Beyond local orbit," she said softly. He frowned. "That shouldn't be possible." Anna tapped the display. "It is not following normal decay patterns." Ethan leaned in. Now he was paying full attention. "Run the model again." She already had. The results did not change. Outside, far beyond their sensors, something unusual was happening. The scent particles were not just drifting. They were interacting with certain rare energy currents in space. Currents the humans had not fully mapped yet. These interactions carried the aroma further than normal physics would allow. Still, inside the station, Ethan Carter and Anna Brooks had no idea. To them, it was still just an experiment in a quiet corner of space. Anna broke the silence. "We may have created a stronger aroma field than intended." Ethan exhaled slowly. "We will reduce vent output next cycle." Anna nodded, but her expression stayed thoughtful. "It is strange though. The signal pattern is very structured." "It's coffee," Ethan said. "Not a signal." Anna gave a small half-smile. "Maybe to us." They did not know that far beyond Calyx 9, other minds were beginning to notice something unusual moving through the dark. Something that did not behave like normal matter or normal energy. Something that seemed almost intentional, even though it was not. But for now, the human station remained calm. The experiment continued quietly. The brew cooled. The data was stored. The vent systems returned to idle. And in the silence of space, the faint trace of humanity's newest creation drifted outward, unnoticed, carrying with it the first spark of an interstellar misunderstanding that would soon grow far beyond anything Ethan Carter or Anna Brooks could imagine. Out in the cold space beyond Calyx 9, where human instruments could barely measure distance or signal strength, something unusual began to spread. It was not light. It was not sound. It was not any known form of communication used by spacefaring civilizations. But it was noticed. The first to detect it were the Virelian observers, a highly structured and analytical species known across nearby systems for their strict logic-based thinking. Their ships were long and thin, built like floating frameworks of glass and metal, always scanning, always calculating. They did not believe in randomness. Everything, to them, had meaning, even silence. Inside their command vessel, Sensor Officer Cale Vren studied the data stream with growing confusion. The readings were unstable, yet patterned. That alone was enough to make the Virelians uneasy. "This is not natural drift," Cale said. Another officer leaned closer. "Radiation fluctuation." "No," Cale replied. "It repeats in structured cycles. See here." He pointed to a wave pattern on the display. It rose and fell in uneven but repeating intervals. To human eyes, it would have looked like noise. But to Virelians, who spent centuries decoding hidden logic in cosmic signals, it looked like intention. The ship's analysis core processed the pattern again and again. Each time, it returned the same conclusion: structured emission. Cale's antenna-like sensory ridges tightened slightly, a sign of concern. "This is not background space activity. This is directed." "Directed by what?" the captain asked. Cale hesitated. "Unknown source. But the pattern suggests cognitive layering." The word cognitive changed the mood in the room immediately. Varelians did not use that word lightly. It meant intelligence. Thought. Communication. Are you saying it is a signal? The captain asked. Kale studied the readings again. Not just a signal. Possibly a psychological construct. A long silence followed. Then the captain spoke in a low tone. A weapon? Kale did not answer immediately, which was answer enough. At the same time, far on the opposite side of Calyx 9's orbit, another faction was experiencing the same drifting phenomenon in a very different way. The Thalcorin envoys were aquatic beings adapted to deep-pressure worlds, and their ships were filled with fluid environments rather than open air. Their perception of space was not visual alone but emotional and sensory, reading fluctuations in energy like currents in an ocean. For them, the drifting aroma was not seen. It was felt. Inside their central chamber, Envoy Lyra Sen suddenly paused mid-report. Her body shifted slightly in the nutrient fluid that surrounded her. Something is entering perception space, she said slowly. Another Thalcorin nearby tilted their head. Foreign presence. Lyra closed her sensory membranes. It is not a presence. It is a pattern. The ship's interpretation systems attempted to translate the incoming data. But translation was difficult. The signal did not match any known communication method. Instead, it triggered emotional resonance patterns. Lyra felt a sudden flash of memory that did not belong to her. Warm light. Comfort. Alertness. Focus. Then confusion. Her body reacted instinctively. It is interfering with cognitive stability. Alarm tones echoed softly through the ship. The Thalcorin did not like unknown interference. In their history, such patterns often preceded psychic manipulation or environmental destabilization. This is not random, one of the elders said. It is structured influence. Lyra agreed, her tone growing serious. It carries intent. The word intent caused immediate concern. Among Thalcorin culture, intent meant direction of will. Something that acted upon others deliberately. Are we under attack? Someone asked. Lyra hesitated. Not physical. But perception is being altered. That was enough. In both fleets, Varelian and Thalcorin, separate interpretations were forming. Neither knew the truth. Neither suspected that the source was a small human station experimenting with a beverage. Instead, both civilizations built explanations based on fear and logic. The Varelians believed they had intercepted a cognitive pattern being projected into space. Possibly a prelude to domination or psychological warfare. The structured nature of the signal made them think it was intelligent design, carefully crafted. The Thalcorin believed they were experiencing a drifting psychic field, something that bent perception itself. The emotional reactions it caused were too strong to be random. Therefore, it must be deliberate interference. Two interpretations. One unknown source. Both incorrect. As reports spread through command channels, tension increased rapidly. On the Varelian flagship, tactical discussions began. If it is a weapon, one officer said, then ignoring it is dangerous. Agreed, another replied. We must locate the origin and neutralize it. Kale Vren studied the trajectory data. The pattern led toward Calyx 9. A small asteroid station, recently registered by neutral human explorers. Origin point is stationary, Kale said. It appears to be a fixed installation. The captain's ridges stiffened. A base. Kale did not correct him. At nearly the same moment, the Thalcorin Council reached their own conclusion. The source is anchored, Lyra said. It is not moving through space. It is generating from a fixed location. Then it is deliberate, an elder responded. A constructed field. Varelian ships moved in structured formations, calculating interception vectors with precision. Thalcorin vessels moved like flowing currents, adjusting fluidly as they approached. Neither knew the other was responding to the same phenomenon. Neither expected company. As they closed in on Calyx 9, their interpretations hardened into certainty. What began as confusion had become assumption. An assumption, in space, often led to confrontation. Inside their command vessels, alarms were not yet active, but tension was already present. Weapons systems were brought to standby. Shields were reinforced. Communication channels were opened, then closed again, then reopened. Everyone was preparing for something they could not fully define. All because a simple human experiment, drifting silently through space, had reached them without explanation. And as the fleets moved closer to Calyx 9, the misunderstanding deepened, growing heavier with every kilometer, until the calm darkness of space no longer felt empty, but full of approaching intent. Liam Ward stood inside the diplomatic chamber of the human station, trying to keep his expression calm even though the situation felt completely unreal. The room was not large, but it had been built to handle multi-species communication. Floating translation units hovered near the ceiling, softly adjusting frequencies so different species could understand one another. Beside him stood Grace Miller, the lead scientist responsible for the Dark Brew experiment. She looked tired, but focused. She had been called here quickly, without full explanation at first, only told that alien forces were approaching Calyx 9 with concern. Now she understood why. On the other side of the chamber, projections of alien representatives filled the space. The Varelians appeared sharp and structured, their movements precise even in holographic form. The Thalcorin appeared as flowing shapes inside fluid fields, their forms shifting gently as they observed the humans. There was tension in the room, even without weapons. It was the kind of tension created by misunderstanding that had traveled too far to turn back easily. Liam spoke first, carefully choosing simple words. "We understand there has been concern about a signal coming from this station." The Varelian representative responded immediately, their translated voice sharp and direct. "Concern is insufficient. We classify the emission as structured cognitive interference." Grace exchanged a quick glance with Liam. That was not a good classification. Liam raised his hand slightly in a calming gesture. "It is not interference. It is a byproduct of a food experiment." The chamber went silent for a moment. Then the Thalcorin representative responded, their voice softer but deeply uneasy. "A byproduct that alters perception across distance cannot be accidental." Grace stepped forward slightly. "We believe what you are detecting is aroma dispersion from a synthesized drink." That sentence hung in the air like something fragile. The Varelian projection tilted slightly. "A drink?" "Yes," Liam said quickly. "A beverage. Something humans consume for comfort and alertness." The silence that followed was heavier than before. The Varelian representative processed the information. "You are stating that the origin of this structured signal is consumption?" "Yes," Grace said. "It is called a dark brew. It is made from synthetic compounds designed to stimulate human cognition." The Thalcorin shifted slightly in their fluid chamber. "You consume cognitive stimulants willingly?" Liam nodded. "Yes. Many humans do." There was another pause. The Varelians appeared to be running internal calculations. The idea clearly did not fit their understanding of intelligence behavior. "One clarification is required," the Varelian said. "You ingest a substance that modifies cognitive function, for comfort?" Grace nodded. "And alertness. Productivity. Sometimes enjoyment." The Varelian response was immediate. "That is inefficient." Liam almost smiled but stopped himself. The Thalcorin representative spoke next, more cautiously. "This substance, it alters perception beyond immediate ingestion." Grace hesitated. "The aroma is strong." It can be detected outside the station. And this is intentional, they asked. No, Liam said quickly. It was not intended to spread that far. It is just how the compound behaves in space conditions. The Thalcorin seemed to process this carefully. So the effect we experienced was not directed. That's correct, Grace said. There is no control signal. No targeting. No intention. The Virelian representative interrupted. Then explain the structure. Grace frowned slightly. Structure. The emission pattern, Kael'Vren explained. It is organized. Repeating. Layered. It mimics intentional design. Liam glanced at Grace again. She looked as confused as he felt. It is just chemistry, Grace said. Some compounds evaporate in patterns depending on temperature and pressure. It is not communication. The Virelian response was immediate. Your species produces structured cognitive-altering emissions by accident? Yes, Liam said slowly. Sometimes science does that. That answer did not seem to help. The Thalcorin representative moved slightly within their fluid chamber. We experienced emotional resonance patterns. Memories that were not ours. Grace nodded. That is possible with strong aromatic compounds affecting sensory processing. Liam added gently, it is similar to how certain smells can trigger memories in humans. The aliens went quiet again. The idea of memory being triggered by scent was not new to them, but the intensity described here was far beyond their expectations. The Virelian representative finally spoke again. Why would a species voluntarily expose itself to such cognitive instability? Liam paused. Grace answered first. It is not instability. It is stimulation. That is not a distinction we recognize, the Virelian said. Liam tried to simplify it further. It helps us think. It helps us focus. It makes us feel awake. The Thalcorin responded softly. Your species requires external alteration to achieve clarity. Grace shook her head. Not requires. Chooses. That seemed to confuse them even more. The Virelians processed this slowly. So this emission was not a weapon. No, Liam said firmly. It is a drink. A drink, the Virelian repeated, as if testing whether the word made sense in this context. Yes, Grace said. Something we consume. Not project. A long silence followed. Then Kael'Vren spoke again, more cautiously this time. And you are certain it is safe? Grace nodded. For humans, yes. In controlled amounts. The Thalcorin representative tilted slightly. And when uncontrolled? Grace hesitated. It becomes strong. Very strong. That answer did not reassure anyone in the room. Liam stepped in quickly. We believe the issue you detected was a venting error. We can reduce it further to prevent future spread. The Virelian representative studied him. You are not denying responsibility. We are taking responsibility, Liam corrected. But it is not an attack. Another pause. Slowly, the tension in the room began to shift. Not fully, but slightly. The idea of intentional hostility was still present, but now mixed with confusion. The Thalcorin representative spoke again, quieter this time. We will require observation of this substance. Grace nodded. That can be arranged safely. The Virelians did not respond immediately, but their posture changed slightly. Less aggressive. More analytical. Liam noticed it first. The shift from threat assessment to curiosity. Still, nothing was resolved. Only understood differently. And as the meeting continued, one fact became clear to all sides. The universe had not been broadcasting a weapon or a signal. It had been carrying something far stranger. A human habit. Even after the meeting inside Calyx 9, nothing truly settled. The words of Liam Ward and Grace Miller had reached the alien fleets, but understanding did not spread evenly. Information traveled fast in space, but interpretation traveled faster, and often in the wrong direction. On the Virelian ships, discussions became divided. Some believed the humans were honest, that the dark brew was simply a strange biological habit. Others were not convinced. To them, anything that could alter perception across distance still needed careful control. Even if it was not a weapon now, it could become one. Cale Vren stood before a tactical display, watching the continued readings from Calyx 9. The pattern was still there. Still structured. Still spreading. This cannot be ignored, one officer said. It is already influencing perception in multiple vessels, another added. Cale remained silent for a moment. Then he said, if it is not a weapon, it may still be useful. That single idea changed the tone of the room. On another side of the approaching fleet, the Thalkoran envoys were having a very different conversation. Their experience of the aroma had not faded. If anything, it lingered in their sensory memory like a half-formed dream. It was calming, alerting, and deeply confusing all at once. One of the younger Thalkoran spoke carefully. The pattern stabilizes emotional flow. It is not hostile. An elder responded. It alters perception without consent. That alone makes it dangerous. But it is not harmful, the younger one insisted. The debate continued, growing more complicated with each exchange. Some began to suggest containment for study. Others suggested careful integration. A few even wondered if it could be replicated. Across both fleets, the same phenomenon was happening, confusion turning into interest, and interest slowly turning into competition. Because anything that affected minds, even in small ways, was valuable. And so, without any agreement, ships began adjusting their approach. Some Virelian vessels moved closer to collect stronger readings. Some Thalkoran ships extended sensory arrays to feel the pattern more clearly. Neither side realized they were increasing tension simply by observing too closely. Inside Calyx 9, the humans were unaware of how quickly things were shifting again. Ben Clark stood in the engineering bay, staring at the control panel for the venting system. His job was simple: regulate atmospheric release from the experimental lab. Reduce emissions. Stabilize output. Keep everything within safe limits. He looked tired. The situation had already become more complicated than expected. Why is everyone suddenly interested in aroma dispersion rates? He muttered to himself. The station AI responded calmly. External inquiries have increased by 300%. Ben sighed. Of course they have. He began adjusting the system carefully. The goal was to reduce output by tightening filtration filters and slowing vent cycles. It should have been straightforward. But space systems were sensitive. Even small changes could have unexpected results. Let's just bring it down to minimal leakage, Ben said, mostly to reassure himself. He entered the new parameters. At first, nothing changed. The readings slowly began to stabilize. The aroma output decreased slightly. Ben nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. Good, he said. That should calm things down. But then the system responded. But it was happening. A sudden surge of aromatic particles was released through the vent system. Not dangerous. Not explosive. But significantly stronger than before. The station alarms did not sound, because nothing was breaking. But sensor graphs outside the station changed rapidly. The drifting aroma plume expanded. Farther than before. Stronger than before. And now, clearly detectable by every fleet nearby. On the Virelian flagship, Cale Vren froze as the signal intensity increased. It is growing, he said. That is impossible, another officer replied. But the data did not lie. On the Thalcorin vessels, the reaction was even more immediate. The sensory fields filled again with that same strange pattern, now clearer, deeper, more defined. Lyra Sen recoiled slightly in her fluid chamber. It is stronger, she said sharply. Much stronger. Intentional amplification, someone asked quickly. No, she answered, but uncertainty crept into her voice. The pattern suggests instability, not control. That distinction mattered, but not enough to calm anyone. On Virelian ships, theories shifted again. Either they are testing escalation, one officer said, or they have lost containment. Kale studied the readings carefully. Or they are unaware of the effect they are producing. That does not matter, another replied. The result is the same. More ships began to converge. The aroma plume, invisible to human eyes, now stretched across a wider region of space. It interacted again with subtle energy currents, spreading its influence farther than before. Not as a message. Not as a weapon. Just as chemistry meeting physics in unexpected ways. But perception did not care about intent. To the Virelians, it looked like escalation. To the Thalcorin, it felt like intensification. To both, it looked like something growing beyond control. And in space, anything that grows without explanation becomes a threat in the mind of those who observe it. Inside Calyx 9, Ben Clark stared at the data, realizing the mistake. I think I made it worse, he said quietly. Anna looked at him, then at the readings. That's an understatement. Ben ran a hand through his hair. We were trying to reduce the spread. And instead, Anna said, we increased attention. Outside, far beyond their understanding, fleets began adjusting weapons to standby, sensors to full focus, and formations into tighter coordination. Not because they wanted conflict. But because they no longer understood what they were witnessing. And when understanding fails in space, preparation for the worst becomes the only option left. The dark brew continued to drift silently through the cosmic domain, unchanged, unaware, and entirely indifferent to the growing storm of interpretation forming around it. The situation around Calyx 9 had reached a point where silence was no longer possible. Too many ships had gathered. Too many readings had been misread, reread, and argued over. What had started as a strange drifting aroma had turned into a full interstellar misunderstanding that neither the Virelians nor the Thalcorin could fully resolve on their own. Humanity, caught in the center of it, realized something important: explaining was no longer enough. They needed to demonstrate. Inside the station, Sophie Lane prepared the controlled test. She was a medic, calm under pressure, chosen not for engineering skill or diplomacy training, but for something more practical. She understood human biology better than anyone on Calyx 9, and she was careful with anything that could affect the mind. The dark brew had been isolated in a sealed chamber, reduced to a safe concentration. Even so, the system reading still showed strong cognitive stimulation properties. Sophie checked the limits again and again. We are not here to impress them, she said quietly. Liam Ward stood nearby, watching the alien delegates through the observation glass. We are here to stop a misunderstanding from turning into something worse. Grace Miller adjusted the containment interface one last time. The sample is stable. It will not spread. Sophie nodded. Then we proceed carefully. Outside the chamber, the alien representatives waited. The Virelians were still structured and precise in their posture, but less rigid than before. Curiosity had slowly replaced some of their suspicion. The Thalcorin, still fluid in movement, seemed tense but attentive, as if sensing that something important was about to happen. Kale Vren spoke first. This is a controlled exposure event. Liam nodded. Yes. One sample. One observer. Lyra Sen responded softly. And if perception destabilizes? Sophie answered before Liam could. It won't. That confidence was not arrogance. It was simply human certainty in something they had tested many times on themselves. The chamber opened. A single delegate was chosen from the Virelian side. Kale Vren stepped forward. From the Thalkorin, Lyra Sen observed closely but did not enter. They wanted data first. Safety first. Sophie placed the small sealed cup in front of Kale. The liquid inside was dark, almost black, with faint heat rising from it. Even in controlled form, the aroma was noticeable. Kale studied it carefully. This is the source. Yes, Sophie said. But much weaker than what you detected in space. Kale hesitated. And this will not affect cognition beyond safe thresholds. It will affect cognition, Sophie corrected. Just not in a harmful way. That distinction meant little to Virelian logic, but they accepted it for the test. Kale lifted the cup. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. He drank. At first, nothing happened. Then his posture changed slightly. His sensory ridges tightened, then relaxed. His eyes focused more sharply. Data processing systems within his suit began registering increased neural activity. But there was no distress signal. No overload. No instability. Instead, Kale blinked once. Then again. This is unusual, he said. Sophie watched carefully. How do you feel? Kale paused. Alert. Focused. Heightened processing clarity. Lyra Sen leaned forward slightly from her observation position. Any destabilization? Kale considered carefully. No. That single word shifted everything. Sophie exhaled slowly. Liam's shoulders relaxed slightly. Grace checked the monitors. No negative physiological response. The room began to change atmosphere. The tension that had been building for cycles started to loosen. Kale looked at the empty cup. This is what caused the emissions. Yes, Sophie said. Kale processed that. Then the scale of your resilience is significant. Liam almost smiled. We've been told that before. From the observation side, Lyra Sen spoke again. You consume this regularly? Yes, Grace replied. Many humans do. A long pause followed. Then Lyra said something unexpected. That explains the pattern. Kale turned slightly. Explain. Lyra hesitated. The emissions were not structured aggression. They were consistent exposure output. Repeated cycles. Stable but strong. Kale considered this. Like a habitual process. Yes, Lyra said softly. Not a weapon. Not interference. A routine. The realization spread slowly across both alien representatives. What they had interpreted as possible manipulation was actually repetition. What they thought was intentional projection was simply habit. Human habit. Kale spoke again. You willingly subject yourselves to this effect daily. Sophie nodded. Yes. And remain functional. Yes. A pause. Then Kale said something that surprised even the humans. That is impressive. Lyra added quietly. And concerning. Liam stepped forward. We understand it is different from your biology. But it is safe for us. Kale looked at him. Your species tolerates high cognitive stimulation as routine. It helps us, Liam said simply. That simplicity carried weight. Slowly, the meaning of everything began to shift. The fleets outside were informed. The interpretations began to change. What was once seen as a possible threat or interference was now being re-evaluated as something far stranger. A cultural behavior. Not hostile. Not controlled. Just human. In the following cycles, more controlled tests were conducted. Carefully, cautiously, under supervision. The Thalkorin confirmed no psychic destabilization. The Varelians confirmed no structural signal manipulation. What remained was only effect, alertness, focus, and unfamiliar intensity. And fascination. That fascination spread quickly. Within days, ships that had once prepared for confrontation were now requesting formal exchange protocols. Not for weapons. Not for technology. But for understanding the source of the phenomenon. Calyx 9 changed. It was no longer seen as a threat location. It became a meeting point. A neutral station where species gathered not in fear, but in curiosity. Human engineers repaired the vent system fully. No more uncontrolled dispersion. The aroma was contained, measured, and shared only in controlled environments. And slowly, something unexpected happened. Meetings began to take place over cups of the dark brew. Not because anyone needed it. But because it had become a symbol. A reminder that what seemed dangerous at a distance could be simple when understood up close. Liam Ward often watched these gatherings and shook his head slightly in disbelief. What started this whole crisis, he once said to Grace, is now part of diplomatic protocol. Grace smiled faintly. We should probably write that down in history records carefully. And maybe not tell Earth how badly we almost caused a war over coffee, Liam added. Grace laughed softly. Agreed. Across the cosmic domain, the reputation of humanity began to shift. They were no longer seen as unpredictable newcomers or potential threats. They were seen as something else entirely. A species that voluntarily consumed something powerful, stimulating, and overwhelming, just to feel more awake. Not warriors. Not conquerors. Just humans. And in the end, that was what made them unforgettable. Because in a universe filled with calculated caution and controlled perception, humanity had accidentally proven something far more surprising than aggression or intelligence. They could handle the storm. And sometimes, they even drank it.